Okay. Welcome everybody to this session of the Data Doctor. Today we're going to talk about filtering LOD expressions. And this is a question that I see literally every day come up on the forum. And it's not just new users, it's very experienced users also come up with questions on just how you apply filters to fixed LODs. I think we better start with a little bit of a discussion of how you write a fixed LOD and what it actually means and how it works. Fixed is one of the three LOD expressions. It starts out with curly brackets on either end, and then the keyword fixed. That's followed by a list of dimensions and a colon, right? Here's the colon, and then an aggregating expression to tell Tableau how to aggregate the detailed records. Now, if you were to say this in words, what you'd say is you'd say, take all the combinations of region and segment. And we're going to use Superstore data here. So if you take a look at regions, there's 4 regions and then there's 3 segments. So take a look at those combinations. That's 12 values, and sum the detail records up so that they to those 12 values. Now, if you think of your data as a pyramid, the data structure is a pyramid. When we enter the data into Tableau, the Superstore data has 10,000 records in that data set. The expression I just wrote here, this fixed region segment, will have a total of 12 values. And what we're doing is we're creating another layer in that data set that's higher in that pyramid than the initial values that we put in. And this happens to be these 10,000 records are going to be aggregated up to 12 records at the combination of region and segment. Now, the beauty of LOD expressions is they're not aggregates in themselves. So you can use that LOD expression in any type of formula, any calculation. You can use it anywhere, just like your regular detailed data. And also, you're not limited to one LOD expression in the data structure. You can come back and have another level, like this here, fixed region, sum sales, has 4 values in it, and we can even go to the top of the pyramid and create an LOD expression that looks like this, fixed sum of sales, and it has 1 value. Or that can also be written just like this. This is called a table LOD, and it's just the sum of sales. It leaves out the fixed and the colon. These two are interchangeable. They mean exactly the same thing. And essentially what we're doing, we're not only creating layers in the data set, but you can think of it kind of like a subtotal that you can grab and you can use in another formula. Well, if we're having trouble with filters, let's take a look at how filters affect that LOD expression. And to do that, we got to go back to the order of operation. We've talked about the order of operation before. It's the 10 steps that Tableau goes through, or the sequence that it goes through every time you create a worksheet. And fixed LOD expressions are created right here in step 4 of that order of operation. Now, if you want to apply a filter to the detailed data, to this 10,000 record level data, if you want to apply a filter before the LOD is calculated, you would place that dimension in context. And then you could write a filter against that context filter, if you will. If you want to apply a filter after the LOD is calculated, you apply it as a dimension filter in step 5. Now you hear us talk about gray filters and blue filters. Gray filters are context filters, and you'll see when we change a filter to context, the pill itself changes to gray. If the filter is not in context, or the dimension is not in context, then it's a dimension filter, and it's a blue filter. Well, let's take a look at some examples and see how this works. Well, when I first learned Tableau and learned about LOD expressions, I was left with the impression that it was a constant, that you'd write an LOD expression and that was a value that wasn't going to change. And we're going to show you today that that's almost true. It's not quite true because we can filter that value. And I started with this expression. This is just fixed sum of sales, and I'm going to show it to you here. We're going to open that up. That's fixed sum of sales, and that's this value here. And the top of the pyramid for the Superstore data is $2.3 million. Okay, and you can see it's everywhere in this chart. And if I brought in another dimension here, like category, you can see the $2.3 million appears everywhere. Well, This expression is very useful, and we're gonna use this over and over again today. And you may have gotten answers from me if you wrote a question on the forum. I talk about replacing a table calculation for the percent of sales with the LOD equivalent. This is the LOD equivalent. All this does is it says take the sales and divide it by this $2.3 million value. Okay, and I'm going to put that in our chart also. And let's just change that around so we can see that this is the percent of sales, and those values will total 100. Now we can start filtering against that, and let's take a look here. And this is essentially the same chart we were looking at. All I've done in this chart is I've added segment in this chart so we can break out the chart a little bit and see the effect of filtering. And this is our fixed LOD. That's the $2.3 million. And this is the sales by segment. And you can see here's our $2.3 million is fixed by segment and by region. And the sales in the consumer segment in Central was $252,000, or 11% of the total, and so on. Now we're going to start filtering against this, and we're going to see the effect of the filter. I've got region up here. I've got region up here as a blue filter. It's a dimension filter. And if we go back here and take a look, the dimension filter is going to be applied after the LOD is calculated. So if I apply a filter and filter out the southern region, it's applied after the LOD is calculated. So I can take south out, and we can see south is no longer in the chart. The fixed LOD, this expression, was evaluated before the region filter was applied, so that value remains $2.3 million. The total of all sales, and sales with south out of them, is $900,000 for the consumer segment, and so on. And you can see as a result that this value divided by that value is still the 11%. And on this value divided by that value is still the 6.9%. Okay. We could also have taken region and placed it in context. When we place it in context, now the filter is going to be applied before the LOD is calculated. And if we filter out south, the fixed sum, or the top of the pyramid now, is $2 million. It's $1.9 million. It's no longer that $2.3 million we were looking at before. South, and all the records associated with South from that 10,000 record detail level, have been filtered out before the LOD was calculated. And now sales in the central region at 252,000 against the fixed $2 million sale is 13%. So we can filter. If we filter before we calculate the LOD doesn't have those records in it. Okay. If we filter after the LOD has been calculated, the original detail records are in the LOD. And we hear people ask, they talk about creating a formula that ignores the filter. Well, you don't create formulas that ignore filters. Tableau doesn't work that way. Dimensions are filtered, and we can decide when to filter that dimension by either placing it in context or leaving it as a dimension filter. Well, we were looking at region here, and regions in the chart itself. Let's see what happens when we look at a dimension, and here we're going to use category. And category doesn't appear in our LOD expression, and it doesn't appear on the chart. Can we still filter our LOD expression for the dimension category? And let's just see what that effect is going to be. We're going to start by having filter as a blue, or category in a dimension filter as a blue filter. So we're going to filter category after the LOD has been calculated. And I'm going to filter out office supplies. And you can see here, it does not change the LOD expressions. It's still $2.3 million, but it does affect the overall sales. These sales in the central regions don't include office supplies anymore. It's 158,000. I'm just going to put that back in. It used to be 252,000. It's 158,000, and now it's 6.9%. So the total is $797,000 for 34% of the $2.2 million total. Okay. Now, as you can imagine, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add this to context, and we're going to see that we're applying the filter on category before the LOD is calculated. So now the total for the top of our pyramid is a $1,000,006 or $1,578,000. It's no longer that $2.3 million number. We filtered out all of the records associated with office supply before the LOD was calculated. And now that 158,000 versus $1,000,006 is a 10.1% to sale, and so on. So the filter that you're applying, the dimension that you're going to filter against, doesn't have to be in your LOD expression. And that's where a lot of users get confused. They say, well, wait a minute, I want to put that dimension. I want to put category into this LOD expression because I want to filter against it. You don't have to do that. You can place the category or you can place the dimension as a filter in context and filter before the LOD is calculated, or you can apply the filter, in this case, category, as a blue filter, remove it from context after the LOD has been calculated. Okay. Now, I'd like to go one step further here, and I'd like to start taking a look at the I'd like to take a look at the percent of sales using and having region and segment. Sorry, I want to take a look at sales when I have region in the expression itself. Now I've got two expressions. I wrote two expressions here. One is the same expression we've been looking at. It's this fixed sum of sales, and this is the top of the pyramid number. This is there's one number, $2.3 million, the top of the pyramid. And I created this other expression, fixed regional sales. And this is the one that you see here. And this is at the region level, I want the sum of sales. So we saw before in our pyramid, this is 4 values right here. And there are the 4 values, and they're fixed at the region level. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to come back and I'm going to add some values to this. I want to take a look at at this guy right here. This is the percent of total sales. That's the value that we've been looking at. I'm going to add that to our data here. And this is and I also want to add sales here so that we just have it complete in the chart. Okay, here's the sales value, and this value, the percent of total sales, is sales divided by the fixed sum of sales. And I want to look at the same sort of thing at the I'm going to look at the same thing at the region level. And we're just going to take that and put it in our chart also. Okay. And this is the sum of sales divided by the sales at the region level, the fixed sum of sales at the region level. So what we're doing is we're taking a look at the sum of sales divided by this number, the total sales, and that's a 21%. And then we're looking at the sum of sales divided by the region total, and that's going to be 100% until we start applying filters. Okay, now we're going to see the effect of applying a filter. And I've got a category on filter once again, and I want to take out office supplies, and category is going to remain as a blue filter. So we're filtering after the LOD is calculated. Okay, so we filtered out office supply, and we can see here the fixed sales. The LOD for fixed sales is still at $2.3 million. And our regional sales remain unchanged, and they total $2.3 million also. The filter on category is applied after all the LODs have been calculated. So when we're filtering as a blue pill, we're filtering before any of the LODs the fixed LODs have been calculated. Now let's see what happens when we change this over to a context filter and we make it a grade filter. Now it's being applied before the LOD has been calculated. And when we filter out office supplies, we can see the total here for sales is $1.6 million. And our regional totals have changed. They now total $1.6 million also. And the overall total, the top of the pyramid, totals $1.6 million. So we filtered out all the records associated with office supply before any of the LODs were calculated. And you can see how it's affected the overall percentage. And it's real important to remember that when you apply a filter to a dimension that's in context, it's going to affect all of the LODs that you're using, regardless of where they are. And many times users will say, well, I didn't really want to do that. I only wanted to apply it in some cases and not other cases. Well, that's a different discussion, and it's for a different time. I want to go just a little bit further, and I want to take a look at what happens when we do the same sort of calculation. Now we're going to filter out region, and we can see what's happening on the region level. And if I filter out the southern region, and we're going to start with region as a dimension filter, a blue pill, we're going to filter out south, and you can see I filtered out the south region, but the fixed total, as you would expect, remains $2.3 million. We can see that this value divided by that value is 21.8%. And now the total of all those values, which have been filtered so that south isn't in there, that's $1.9 million versus the total of 2.3 is 82%. So apparently the south was about 18% of the total. But you see on a fixed region level, that value divided by that value is still 100%. And just to be complete here, we're going to show this applied as a context filter. So it's being filtered before the LOD is calculated. Now our sales are the $1.9 million. Our fixed sales are the same $1.9 million because all the records for the southern region were eliminated before the LOD was calculated. That $5.1 million versus the $2 million is 26%. And this totals 100 because none of the South records are included anywhere in these numbers. And the central region didn't have any South numbers in it, so that number hasn't changed. And these will still total 100% because we're looking at that number divided by that number. I want to go one step further, and we're going to take a look at a calculation that I've got in here. Which is this value here. I want to take a look at the percent of this number. This is the regional total versus the overall total. Okay, and that's this number out here. And we want to take a quick look and see how that number changes when we apply filters to category. We're going to start with category as we've done before. We're going to take out office supply. And the sales have all changed. You can see these values have now changed, but none of the LODs have changed. Okay, so the overall total is $2.3 million, and the regional total is $500,000 for central, and that's 21% of the total. And just to reinforce what's going on here, is I'm going to put this back into. I'm sorry. I'm going to take category and place it into context. And now we're going to filter for office supplies. And we can see that the sales numbers by region no longer have any office supplies in there. We've completely gotten rid of the category. It's not in any of the data. All of our total fixed is $1.6 million. And that number divided by that number is 21%. And if we were to take a look here, our regional totals have now changed. Okay. And that number divided by the regional total is 100%. And This number divided by the fixed total is 21%. So there's two things going on here. First category, the office supplies were sold in all regions. So when we apply the filter before the LOD is calculated, when we apply the filter to office supplies, it affects all the sales numbers in every region. And because it's applied as a context filter, it also affects all of the LODs. It affects the top of the pyramid, this number, the total number, and it also affects the regional number. Now, I'd like to take this one step further, and we're going to add one more dimension into this display here. And we're going to go region segment. That's what we looked at on the first chart. There's going to be 12 values. And I want to take a look at the sum of sales. And I've added 2 additional values in here. We're going to take a look at this is just what we looked at on the first chart. We're fixed at the region and segment level, the 12 values sum of sales. And then this is the same expression that we've been using. This is the percent of sales. So we're taking sum of sales divided by the regional segment sales total. So we're going to be looking at these levels here to get the regional numbers. Here we see. Okay. Now, this is the same chart we've been looking at previously. I've just added these 2 columns into it, and I want to go back and I'd like to do this and take a look at the effects of filtering here. If we start with no filters applied, we can take a look at the sales numbers, and this is just straight sales. No filters have been applied. Central region is $501,000, and we can see it here. This is fixed at the region level. The overall total number is $2.3 million, and we can see that here. This is the top of the pyramid that we've been looking at. The regional fixed number is the same as the sales number right now with no filters applied. So that number equals that number. And all we're doing here is we're taking sales divided by that fixed value to get that 100%, or that number divided by the regional total to get 50%, or that number divided by the $2.3 million to get 11%. Now, if we start applying filters, we're going to first apply a filter on category, and I want to apply it first as a dimension filter, as a blue filter, and we're going to take out office supplies like we have all along. And we've changed all the sales numbers, but note, we've not changed any of the fixed calculations. Okay, so these are the same numbers as we looked at just before, and they totaled at $2.3 million. The regional total is that 501 number that we looked at, and here it is as a fixed number for each one of the segments in the region. And then the top of the pyramid, the $2.3 million appears on everything. And you can see that sales divided by the regional total of $2.5 million is 63%, divided by the 501 number, the total that's in the region, everything in the region, it's 31% of what's in the total, and divided by the overall total, all sales, at 6.9%. And if we were to total all these up and we were to do the math, we would see that once we take office supplies out of sales, they represent 68% of the regional total, and they'd also obviously represent 68% of the other 2 values also. Now, let's see what happens when we put category into context. And you're going to say, well, you already know that we're going to affect all the LOD expressions. And let's just see that, just to reinforce that, because this is the point that gets very confusing for some users, that by placing category in context and then filtering out office supplies, all of the fixed values have now changed. The fixed value by region no longer has any office supplies in it, so the sales, just the everyday sales number, and the fixed office supply turn out to be the same number. This value is the fixed by region. It has changed now because it doesn't have any office supplies, and it will equal this total. And you can see it's 334,000 for all segments in the central region. And the overall fixed number is now $1.6 million, and it's the same in every segment. And if we do the math and we take the sales divided by the fixed number in the region, it's 100%, or divided by the 330 by the total to find the percent of total in the region, it's 47%, or the total overall, it's 10.1%. So when we look at applying filters, there's really a very simple rule to follow. And if you want the filter to affect the LOD, if you want to apply the filter to a dimension and have it affect the LOD, you place the dimension into context. And then that filter is applied in the step before the LOD is calculated. But it will filter all the LODs, and it'll affect all the LODs in your workbook. If you want the LOD not to be affected by the filter, you place the category into it as a dimension filter or a blue pill so that it's applied after the LOD is calculated. Now, we could go on and on and on and look at a lot of use cases, but we're not going to do that today. I mean, you can do that on your own. I do want to show you one other use case that comes up quite often, and that's calculating the last date or the maximum date in the data set. If we wanted to take a look at the last date in the region, we could write an LOD like this: fixed region, and this is going to get us our 4 values again, the max order date, the last date in each region. And if we wanted to look at the last date in the data set, we could look at this. And here I've used this table format, max order date inside the curly brackets. So this is the max order date in the overall, and this is the max order date in the region. So you can see here that when filters haven't been applied, and I did cheat a little bit. I filtered this down in February in February of 2022, just because the dates changed nicely and you're able to see the effect here. But this is the last date overall in that month of February, and that's the 28th of February. The last order date, the last date an order was placed is February 28th in 2022. And in the central region, the last order date was the 25th, and it was the 28th in the east, and in the south it was the 25th, and in the west it was the 26th. Now we can come back, and I place category in context, so we filter it out before the LOD is calculated. And if I remove office supplies, we can see the dates have changed. So now in the remaining 2 categories, there's no office supply data in our data set, our data table anymore. There's only furniture data and technology data. And if we look for the last date in the data set, it's now the 26th in the central, and it's the 26th overall. If we look in the central region for the latest date, it's the 21st now, and the 24th in the east, the 25th in the south, and the 26th in the west. Okay. Good. That's what I wanted to share with you this morning. Users get confused on this, and I see questions on applying filters to fixed LOD expressions. I see those questions every day. And it's really not that difficult to do. It's one very simple rule to follow. If you want the filter, if you want to filter out data before you calculate the LOD, put the dimension into context. If you want the filter after the LOD has been calculated, then place the dimension into a blue pill as a dimension filter. Okay. I thank you for your time this morning. The information that you've seen is already out on my blog at jimdehner.com, and I've also uploaded this workbook to my Tableau public site. Download it, work with it, practice it a little bit, but applying filters to fixed LODs is really not that difficult thing to do. You just have to remember one rule. Thank you very much. Bye now.